Chapter 5, Section 2, The Powers of Congress, Part 1. Hello, Mount Pleasant. Today we will be learning about the powers of Congress. Specifically, we will look at implied powers, express powers, and inherent powers. Once we're done, you'll be able to identify the limits of Congress, non legislative powers, and the change that Congress has undergone in our history. Please let me know if you have any questions. I'm going to break this section into segments, excuse me, so that it's a little easier on you, and we'll do it today and tomorrow with a quiz to follow that. Now, these following terms you need to be able to put in your note folders or on your computer, and you can update these at any time. I'm going to go over each term as an introduction to the chapter, but you're not required to write them down yet, so be patient. We will go over each again, and let's start with the first one, the necessary and proper clause. And this is also known as the elastic clause, and making any law that would be necessary or proper for U.S. citizens, but it's not listed in the Constitution. Number two is an indirect tax, and that's a tax that is wrapped into the full price of the cost, and that would be gasoline, something like gasoline. A direct tax is a tax that you pay directly to the government, such as, well, the income tax that's coming up soon. Number four is a deficit, and that's when there's not enough money to pay for expenses because you're not bringing in enough revenue. Number five is Commerce Clause, and that allows Congress to regulate trade between the states. Number six is subpoenas, and these are legal documents that require a person to testify. Number seven is a writ of habeas corpus, and this is a Latin term that means to present a body or person in front of a judge or a court. And this, of course, was put on hiatus during the Lincoln administration, which caused an uproar, of course. Number eight is Bill of Attainder, and that's a law that forbids Congress from punishing a person without a trial. Best way to put a Bill of Attainder, and I'll explain it now and I'll explain it again later, but this is if someone were to do something and you didn't like it, so you made it a law and then punished that person. That's pretty much what a bill of attainder is. And the last one is an ex post facto law, and this one states it's much like the bill of attainder, except a little bit reversed. Ex post facto laws, you cannot charge somebody with something that was once legal but now illegal. If you go back to the 1980s, all the states upped their drinking ages from 18 to 21 because, well, if they didn't do so, then the federal government would give them highway money, and of course, Mothers Against Drunk Drivers was also, a big interest group then. But because 18-year-olds were already allowed to drink back then, they couldn't be denied that right. So as long as you were 18 already in a state that allowed it, you could continue, and that's what ex post facto is. So we'll explore these deeper when we get to them. In the last few weeks, we talked about how advocates or interest groups shape our Congress. Take a look at this image. It's the same image, but what are the differences? Why do you think Congress changed these food labels the way they did? When you were in elementary school, Michelle Obama, the wife of President Barack Obama, changed the way you kids ate in school. No longer would kids get to eat junk food or lunch for lunch, or have lunches that were made from like Pizza Hut or Taco Bell or something. Now, by law, our lunches had to be 600 calories or less a day. Now, if you've never read your nutrition labels when you went through the school lines, look how much that chocolate milk has, or even your white milk, or even that tea that you have. Um, how many calories is in it? How fast can you get to 600 calories in a day? And of course, you kids are very active at your age, so is 600 really enough to get you through? And think about those football players, or baseball players, or swimmers, or softball players, anyone who's in sports. Most of you didn't have a second meal. Now they offer a second meal at the end of the day, but you were going from 600 calories, and that was supposed to last you 3 year practices. So yeah, hangry was a true thing. But why do we highlight the serving size and the calories but keep everything else the same? Well, think about it. Our government is trying to fight a health issue, and that, of course, is obesity. If Congress can get people to eat well, then the consequences could be beneficial in lowering healthcare costs. Now, when our founding fathers put together the Constitution, they made sure that they listed rights and powers that they would use that people would know and could not dispute. The first was coining money, and money had always been a contentious point in our history, from the first coin minted to the gold and silver wars that you learned about last year, to the changing of our money with different faces. By allowing Congress to regulate coining money, states could no longer mint their own, which stabilized trade and inflation. But do you know what our money is backed by? It's not gold and it's not silver, it's nothing more than faith. That's right. It's not gold. It's not silver. It's not any other precious metal. It's faith. But what if I took a $5 bill? How much is that worth to you? If you say faith and you agree to trade that $5 bill on, let's say, Starbucks, then you say that $5 is worth coffee. Now, I pose this question. What if I took a $5 bill, bought a lottery ticket, and won $50,000? Is it still worth only $5? Collecting taxes in our country wasn't always what you see, and it still is different in every state, and even in the county. Congress had a difficult time getting states to give up money, but once they listed it in the Constitution and agreed to take enough apportionment, people were more satisfied paying. Regulating commerce is a powerful, is a power that is listed in the Constitution that makes anything from a tradable good to a human as commerce. And of course, if you remember when we talked about the Heart of Atlanta motel, in which Congress used humans as commerce to end discrimination, well, then, yes, if you play it that definition, it works and can be something negative and pass the court test, and it keeps everyone equal. Next one is to raise an army, and that was difficult in the early days of the United States, but today we're 2 million strong, and Congress can raise or lower that number and can do so with incentives and mandatory retirement ages for its soldiers. And the last express power is to declare war. Only Congress, not the president, can declare war. A president may send troops anywhere in the world for 60 to 90 days for military action, but anything longer, and the president would have to ask Congress for a declaration of war. And before you ask, we are still at war in Afghanistan, and we have been for 20 years now. But why should Congress have the ability and not the president? Could it be that 535 or members are more reasonable than one man? Think about that. Let's shift now from expressed powers to implied powers. An implied power is not listed in the Constitution, but rather implied. Can you define implied? If I had a basket of lollipops on my desk, it would imply that I wanted you to have lollipops. Whereas if I had them hidden in my desk, it would imply I didn't want you to have any. So think about what implication or implied means. Implied powers are found in Article 1, Section 8, Clause 18, and most commonly referred to as the elastic clause. As we maneuver through this pandemic, Congress has issued relief in the form of stimulus checks, and there's nothing in the Constitution that mentioned COVID or COVID relief, but through restrictions, closures, and hospitalizations, it's become necessary to keep people making money and paying for housing, rent, and food. And therefore, we sort of expand the Constitution to fit our needs. Summarize instances when Congress has acted on behalf of the people. In 1906, President Teddy Roosevelt changed our country after he read Upton Sinclair's novel The Jungle. And this book was an expose that was meant to show how the lives of immigrants was horrible. Instead, it showed the greed and how food companies were treating the food we ate, from the tobacco spit to the rat hairs to even putting sawdust in our food. Of course, Congress, at the urging of Roosevelt, created what was known as the Food and Drug Administration. It's also a time when you would see ads like the ones you see here in front of you for cocaine drops as well. Now, cocaine is a Schedule 1 drug, and everything we eat or the medicines we take now must be approved by our government. When else does the government act on behalf of the people? Well, let's take a quick look here. They act on our behalf for minimum wage. Of course, we know that they're trying to raise it now to over $15 an hour. When they created the Air Force during World War II, banning discrimination, the IRS, which of course collects our taxes, the American Disability Act, uh, conscription, or what you know as the draft, the Food and Drug Act, which we just talked about, and of course the last one, and there's many more, just this isn't the last one, but the last one on my list, is pollution control. We'll finish this section looking at the last two types of congressional power. The first is inherent power, and these aren't listed in the Constitution but are needed based on the nature of the beast. Think about how ridiculously long our borders are in the North and the South. Well, Congress has the power to regulate this by dictating who can cross and when. Then we also have the issue of dealing with foreign nations, which isn't spelled out, but Congress has taken responsibility to act on these items. And lastly, is powers denied Congress? The founding fathers were quick to hold power from Congress, and they did so with this act, which essentially limited government power. Now, we're going to wrap up there, Mount Pleasant, but I want you to think about these two questions, and you do not have to go to Schoology because I'm not going to put these up for you. I put these up for the other classes. Name one thing that Congress does to protect the welfare of the people. And the second thing I want you to think about is, why is it a good idea to allow Congress powers not stated in the Constitution? So, with that, I will see you tomorrow. Have a great day, Mount Pleasant.